how to determine where you're going to focus your church planting efforts. That's what we're going to talk about in this session. Where do you feel that God is leading you? Now, you could probably make a case for a church plant, a new work in just about every community now. Like, you could make the case and say there's need here and we could do something about it. But how do you know where you're going to go and plant next as a network?
Yep.
And how do you make that decision together, collectively, so there's complete buy-in from the whole network, right? And so everyone's behind it, they're supportive. Now, that's an interesting process, because if it's just me as an individual, I can make that decision. I can, do some praying and searching, and then we go for it. But when you're involved with other people, you're talking about a whole nother level of collective discernment, right? And so that's what we want to unpack in this module a little bit, just to gain clarity on how we're going to actually determine where we're going to go. So there's a lot of dynamics involved in this. Can you think of a few that may just pop out at you?
Yeah, there's a few of just even thinking, is it a number? God's put a number in my heart. God's put 100 churches in 25 years.
Yeah.
There's a timeline, there's a number, there's going to be a key result at the end of it. Or is it, God give me the college towns? It's a college town feel, or it's
Right.
the ACC conference because you really love UNC basketball. There's something there with that. Whatever it is, there's networks for that all over the place. Just as many pastors as there are for that. And I've been a part of a few of those, but I'm just thinking of one really interesting one that a guy that you and I both met through Exponential the last couple of months, a guy named Jorge, who through his network, he just started talking to people, started planting churches, but he's doing it virtually.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So they're planting churches, and it's a kind of an out there concept, but he's been able to help start churches in Argentina, in Chile, in Guatemala, and all across the United States, little pockets of these things, starting out as little micro churches of him pouring into these pastors, but doing a lot of that virtually. And so I think there's a ton of different ways to do it, but just kind of starting to clarify, what am I going to do? Where are we going to go as a team? And being okay with it maybe in a little bit of a different vision than what you came into it with. It's a big puzzle out there, and we all have just one piece of it.
Right.
So again, going back to the last module of relationships, being okay with somebody having a different vision than I do. But if we put those two visions together with the same values, we start to see the puzzle actually come together and widen our perspective a bit.
That's right. And I think it's helpful even go back to the Acts 1:8 vision template. If you use Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth as kind of that vision template, and ask yourself, what am I doing in each of those realms? What am I doing in my Jerusalem? What am I doing in my Samaria? In the ends of the earth. What does that look like for us as a network to come around that kind of Acts 1:8 vision template, and to say, here's what we're doing in these parts, and here's what this can look like together. I think that's really helpful as far as you gain location clarity. There's also like you think about the Apostle Paul, the way he's kind of moving and interacting through the early church era, right?
Yeah.
The book of Acts. He's constantly in contact, like he said, pray without ceasing. He's in contact with God. He's getting direction, and he's sensing when there's an open door in particular communities. And something about that open door spoke to him, and the Spirit spoke to him, but it was like, there's opportunity here to impact. And there was closed doors, where it's like, we're not going over there because it won't be good.
Yeah.
And we got to stay focused on our efforts. So beginning to discern as a collective, what are the closed doors right now? And maybe that community might be closed right now, but 2 years from now, maybe it opens back up.
Yep.
I think about our first church plant that we set out to plant out of our Epic Church. We had the church planner actually go through a process of discerning the communities, because we really wanted to have the church planner make the decision ultimately.
Right.
That's the preferred method. Instead of saying, hey, we want you to go plant here, we want the church planner to actually say, I feel called here And we know that's actually the number one reason why church plants succeed is because the church planter felt a strong calling to the community. So we want to, as a network, encourage that. We want to share the options that we feel like are in front of us and where the open doors might be. But we want the church planter to actually go in there and discern and sense specifically for them, this is what they're called to do. And so stewarding that process is part of the job of everyone in the church planting network, because that's what they're helping to contribute. But I think of this is interesting. So he felt a particular community. It was in Michigan. We had kind of two primary ones we laid out there, and he went for one, and then this other one was our next church plant, which ended up me going out to plant again the second time. And when I think about that scenario, like it was the community that I ended up planting in again, it was a closed door at that time.
Right.
And it was good and right. And, as we went through that whole discernment process with the planter, lined up perfect. But what happened in the next plant would not have happened during those years.
Yeah.
And just seeing how God came through and provided in some amazing ways, the timing ended up being perfect. And so that's what you really want to go for when you're kind of moving as a network, gaining that sense of just God is all in this, and we're sensing where the open doors are right now.
And you can do your best to plan for anything. The best laid plans of mice and men. I mean, we can do our best to plan. And a lot of this is about planning. But more important is to have a heart and an attitude of preparedness. Okay, you know where you want to go, you know what you want to do. But if there is a closed door, if there is a wall that comes up, the tire falls off of the whole thing.
That's right.
Like, you got to pull over and you got to recalibrate some of that stuff. One of the things that we were doing in Louisiana, we had 3 churches in the little tight-knit area, and we were busting at the seams. So start the building plan. That's what you got to do. And all the churches were going to expand. And I started doing just some research and noticed that there was about an 80,000 person population that we were missing in just the driving distance and where everybody was. Did a little GIS of where our givers were, where our people were that were going to our church. And I said, we need to plant here along the I-10 corridor, I-49, I-10 corridor. We need to plant there. No, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We got plenty of people. And it showed the hard data. Okay, so the heart data and the hard data. Meanwhile, God's doing something in one of our local pastors. He wants to do something more than what he was doing as a campus pastor. Wanted to plant an autonomous church. 3 months later, an older Baptist church says, we can't afford our payments anymore. Take over our building, $5 million building, take over it, $500,000, we'll give it to you. Right where I've said this is where we need to go. Through prayer, through the time, we went into it. The pastor's successful, over 1,000 people in the church within the first year. Where he left, populated again. It's phenomenal. You have to be prepared with your plan.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think it's part of this module that we're going to actually go in and develop some of that plan.
Yes.
And that's the hope that we see throughout this module, is actually getting clarity on what God's calling you to do, just the regional level, but then also what would be your plan going forward, how to work with church planners. What's your particular niche? Why would church planners who maybe are from the outside looking in, why would they be attracted to your church planting network and want to plant with you? And then how you would actually walk them through that process of discerning and sensing God's calling and ultimately staying in step with the Spirit. So that's the goal of this module.